Welcome to our deep dive. Today, we're really diving into Malutikia's analysis of the recent Philippine elections
Yeah.
and using it to try to break down the Duterte family's political strategy.
Okay.
It's like we're analyzing a game of chess,
Right.
but the stakes are the 2028 elections.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
So Tikia called this latest election cycle a mad dash, right?
Yeah.
Like last minute surprises, power plays, you name it.
A lot of that. Yeah.
And what I thought was really interesting is how she was characterizing the family's approach to this election as very calculated,
Yeah.
even going so far as to call Rodrigo and Sara different brands of Duterte.
Right.
What do you make of that?
It's fascinating. I mean, it really points to the Dutertes being very aware
Yeah.
of their individual public images
Right.
and how those images are going to resonate with voters.
Right.
And we have to remember they haven't even campaigned together before.
Yeah, that's true.
So Sara Duterte's own brand, separate from her father's, is very much still something that's being worked on.
Yeah, it makes you wonder how much of her win in 2022
Right.
was riding on her father's legacy.
Exactly.
Like, were people voting for her,
Right.
or were they voting for another Duterte?
That's the question, right? And Tikia actually mentioned these Duterte tracer candidates,
Oh, yeah.
which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah.
It's basically these individuals that are placed on the ballot,
Yeah.
not necessarily to win,
Right.
but to measure support for the Duterte brand
Mm-hmm.
across different regions and demographics.
That's interesting.
So it's a very subtle tactic, but it's very telling.
So they're like testing the waters in different markets before they launch a new product.
Exactly.
Yeah, you could see that, yeah.
And speaking of strategic moves, Tikia had some really interesting insights about Rodrigo Duterte running for mayor of Davao City
Yeah.
instead of for something with maybe like a little more national visibility.
Right.
What's the strategy there?
Well, that's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
Because Tikia argues that controlling Davao City.
Right. It's not just about sentimentality.
Yeah.
It's about maintaining a stronghold.
Okay.
It gives them access to resources.
Right.
They have a loyal support base there.
Yeah.
And it allows them to exert influence at a regional level,
Right.
which, as we know, can translate to national power.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's very strategic.
So it's less about taking a step back from the national stage and more about just really solidifying their foundation.
Think of Davao City as like their political fortress.
Right.
Controlling it gives them leverage,
Yeah.
a place of strength to operate from as they plan their next move.
Yeah.
And don't forget, Rodrigo Duterte's history and influence in Davao run very deep.
Right.
This isn't just any city for them.
For you.
It's the heart of their political dynasty, really.
Yeah, for sure.
So it holds a lot of significance for them.
And it's not just Davao City itself, right?
Huh.
Like Tikia mentioned that winning there
Yeah.
often has ripple effects
Absolutely.
throughout that entire region.
It's about that domino effect.
Yeah.
You know, a strong showing in Davao City,
Right.
it could really sway political alliances,
Yeah.
shape things at the regional level.
Right.
And then, of course, that impacts national politics.
Tikia also brought up the potential for Sara Duterte to face impeachment,
Yeah,
which seems like it could really change their plans,
for sure.
especially if it were to happen during the 2028 campaign season.
Right.
Like, what would that even look like for her politically?
Well,
Especially as she's trying to kind of carve her own path
yeah.
separate from her father's legacy.
Well, you know, an impeachment trial is really a double-edged sword.
Right.
On the one hand, you could see it generating sympathy among voters,
Yeah.
right? They see her as a victim of political games.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, it risks bringing back up all of those controversies,
Right.
any criticisms that were tied to her father's administration.
Yeah, for sure.
And that makes it harder for her to distance herself,
Right.
solidify her own political identity.
It would just be like constantly reminding voters of that connection.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And don't forget about the family's influence in the Senate.
Right. Yeah.
Even if they don't have a huge majority.
Right.
Their alliances run very deep.
Yeah.
Tikia highlighted their connections
Yeah.
to some other really powerful political families.
Right.
The Villers, the Tolfo brothers.
Right.
These are important allies to have.
Yeah.
And when you combine those alliances with their strategic maneuvering,
Right.
it gives them a lot of leverage in the Senate,
Yeah.
which could be critical
Yeah.
in the event of an impeachment trial.
Right.
Or, honestly, any other major political battle.
It seems like they're really good at playing the long game.
Yeah.
You know, like carefully building up those relationships.
Absolutely.
They're building up their power bases
Right.
so they can really leverage them at the right time.
That's the key.
But with Rodrigo Duterte seeming to step back to Davao,
Right.
do we think there's any world in which he and Sara actually campaigned together on a national stage in 2028?
That is the question, isn't it? Because a joint campaign,
Yeah.
I mean, that would be something to see.
Yeah.
That would be a true display of dynastic force.
Right.
It could really energize their base,
Yeah.
bring their support together,
Right.
but it could also backfire.
Right.
You know, it might alienate some voters
Yeah.
who are wary of dynastic politics.
Right. It could go either way.
Exactly.
It's like having a secret weapon. Right. They're just waiting for the perfect time to use it.
Exactly.
But even with all this talk about strategy and, long-term planning,
Yeah,
2028 is still a ways off.
that's true.
Like, a lot can change between now and then.
Absolutely. I mean, the political landscape is constantly shifting.
Right.
New people will come into the picture.
For sure.
Alliances will be tested.
Right.
We might have some unforeseen events that completely change the game.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
I never know.
And that makes you wonder, like, in that kind of environment,
Right.
what does a winning strategy even look like? Is it about being adaptable, or is it about, sticking to the plan no matter what?
It's probably a combination of both.
Right.
I mean, the Dutertes have shown that they can adapt,
Right.
but they also never lose sight of their goals.
Yeah.
And we have to remember they have another advantage here,
What's that?
a fragmented opposition.
Right.
Tiki pointed this out.
Yeah.
When your opponents are divided, it's easier to maintain control.
So that's something to watch out for then.
Absolutely.
Like any attempts to unify the opposition against them?
Exactly. Can the different factions oppose to the Dutertes?
Right.
Can they set aside their differences?
Right.
Can they present a united front?
Because if they can't, that's a big hurdle.
It's a huge hurdle.
Right.
It makes it that much harder to challenge them.
This has been really fascinating.
Yeah, it's a really interesting situation.
We didn't get all the answers from Takia,
Of course not.
but she gave us a really good framework, I think,
She did.
for understanding, what's at stake here
What to look out for.
and the different ways things could play out.
Exactly, and that's really valuable.
Yeah.
Because when you understand the motivations,
Right.
the strategies,
Yeah.
you're much better equipped to understand the bigger picture.
So as we wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
what's the one thing you really want our listener to take away from all of this?
The Duterte family is a powerful force in Philippine politics.
Right.
But 2028 is not a foregone conclusion.
Okay.
The political landscape is always changing.
Yeah.
Pay attention to the moves being made,
Okay.
the alliances,
Yeah.
the challenges that come up.
And most importantly, stay engaged.
Yes, exactly. Because the future of Philippine politics,
Right.
it's not set in stone.
Yeah.
It's being shaped right now.
Yeah.
And every informed citizen plays a part in that.
That's a great point to end on.
I think so.
This has been a really fascinating look at the Duterte family and their political strategy.
It has.
And we really appreciate you taking the time to break it all down with us.
Oh, it was my pleasure.
And to our listeners, thanks for joining us for another deep dive.
Thanks, everyone.